Excited about our discussion today. My name is Amira Martin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a business owner. And today, what we are focusing on this channel is mentorship with Mary Pender Greene. I've been very fortunate in my career to have been mentored by Mary Pender Greene, and our guests have as well. So with that said, I'm first going to introduce Mary, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. We had a phenomenal interview. Mary Pender Greene is the president and CEO of MPG Consulting. We also have Jonathan Mclean. Jonathan is the vice president of residential and youth justice services with SCO. We have Dr. Bobby Cassiano. Bobby has their doctorate from UPenn, is a scholar and activist and founder of Dr. Bobby. And last but not least, I'm also re-welcoming Sheilah Mabry. Sheilah Mabry is a psychotherapist and life and leadership coach, owner of She Helps Consulting, and also a consultant and trainer with MPG Consulting. So welcome everyone. Terrific to see all of you. And thank you all so much for joining me today and for joining this discussion with Mary. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you all, and whoever this jumps out at, please just chime in, Can you share a bit about your personal story? Like what brought you into this work, or what's your passion around this work? So Jonathan, I'll ask you.
Jonathan.
Okay, go ahead.
So you want me to start?
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
Please.
I think it's a great question. I think I stumbled into it, to be perfectly frank. I spent a lot of my teens and all of my 20s trying to find myself. Young kid from Brooklyn, growing up in a rough environment. So I stumbled into it. I always believed I had a passion to work with people, but social work per se wasn't something that I was necessarily looking to do. I think I got a job doing something that was close to social work and human services. And then I met Mary. And, it was history from there for me. I think, meeting Mary just opened up tons of possibilities. And it was at the right time in my personal and professional life. I can talk all day about it. I don't want to, take up the whole session, but yeah, I think Mary helped me frame what I wanted to do with myself and where I wanted to be as a professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say too that I stumbled into it because I think at some point I wanted to be a lawyer. I considered being a writer when I was younger, and then a lawyer. And then I worked at a public defender, and that made me make the decision to be a social worker. But also, I was social worked when I was younger and I didn't realize it. Like at the Y, social workers were all around helping us as young children all the time. And then at a certain point in my career, I only had a bachelor's degree. I went to a job fair and I met Mary, and she told me that I could do much more for you if you had a master's degree. And I went away, and some years later I came back, and then I got my second year placement at the Jewish Board. And then like learning what social work really was a really important thing to me. And then having people like Mary model, having a range of roles, and operating from those, and having wonderful boundaries, and dealing with all kinds of people across race and sexual orientation and religion. It was really an age. She modeled that. And so it's something that I was like, when I grow up, I want to be like Mary. But Mary would say, I want you to be yourself, the best you can be of yourself. So, yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheilah. So, and I'll ask Bob.
She was an executive, but that connection trickled down to all the people in the kind of community that we were able to really have at the Jewish Board and in throughout the city.
That's just remarkable, Bobby. What comes to mind for you when you look at these folks?
Well, it's why I do the work. Looking at all of you makes me clear that this is why I do the work, and this is why I love the work. And when I think about it, over the years, all of the things that you folks have talked about, Bobby, where you're talking about creating an office that had just people of color, they were not only just people of color, but they were Latinx. And to bring to a white institution the idea that you should have a clinic that has just people that represent that community of color. Doesn't mean that the organization didn't have that in other communities, but there were white people that spoke Spanish, and it was a struggle to keep the office just with folks of color. So bilingual, bicultural, and it was absolutely draining and painful in the process of pushing to do something that wasn't popular at the time. But it worked, and it created lots of people. So I want to say that all of the work that went into making things different really makes me feel awesome about the fact that the work paid off. Look at them. They are awesome in the process. And I think what comes to me most of all is that oftentimes when you're trailblazing, moving things along, you have to stand alone and say stuff that people don't want to hear, and be clear about what your gut tells you. There was no roadmap. The idea is that your gut tells you stuff. And Sheilah, I think about how you went away for 2 years, and then you showed up with in the midst of your master's work. And we stayed in touch during much of that time. The idea of networking and keeping in touch with people over time. Sanabria, I spoke to her 2 weeks ago, and I keep those relationships going, having to do with the fact that it's all about one relationship at a time, one conversation at a time. And Sheilah and I have been connected in so many different ways over the years. And I think of when I first met her and how she has become this superstar. And the idea of being a part of that journey just warms my heart, because I know that many times without the private conversations that I had with you, I wouldn't have been able to keep going, keep doing the work, because yes, I made a difference with you, but you made a difference with me. All of you made a difference with me, because in essence, when I got pushback, when I got questions about why did I do what I did, I was able to see you and your journey, and that would be the reward, long before there was a public reward for what it was that I was doing. And Jonathan, I think about the struggle of getting you into the organization and getting your degree and certification, because it took lots of personal investment and getting people to think outside of the box and act outside of the box. And when I think of where you are at this moment and what the possibilities are, it's like it was well worth the struggle. And so if there's anything that I can hope will come from these conversations, it's really the recognition that investing in relationships, regardless of where it's going to go, without any thought about, oh, it's going to go here, there, or there, the idea of encouraging people to be themselves. And so when I think about how many things you've brought, Jonathan, to the profession.
Do you remember that meeting, the first time we met in your office? That is as crystal as day to me, even today. And that was 15, 16 years ago. I don't remember how many years ago. And I don't mean to, but I just have to say this.
Well, you can tell it, and that would be good for people to hear.
So I was at a point in my life when I met Mary, and I wasn't too hot on the Jewish board because I had a bad experience. But we have a mutual friend who kept telling me, you know, you need to meet Mary Pender Greene. You need to meet Mary. You need to meet Mary. And I'm like, okay. You know, I was at a place where I had a job, but no amount of skill, no amount of talent, no amount of ability would help me move forward without help. That is the situation I was in. And I was acutely aware of that. Like, I don't care what I brought to the table. If someone did not help me, literally, I would not be able to move forward. So it was a life and death situation for me. And I had got connected to somebody to help me get a job at the Jewish board. And, you know, basically I was said, look, I told to go share your story with this person. So I hadn't really done that, you know, in my previous situation. So I went, shared my story, and, you know, essentially in sum and substance, I didn't get the job, which is fine, but I was also judged for what I shared. So then my friend came back to me and he said, listen, you know, that's okay, but I want you to meet Mary. I had already talked to somebody in the Jewish board, and I was like, I'm not, you know. But something in my mind said, trust your friend. I mean, he's helped you get this far. So I'll never forget, I met Mary at the old office on 57th Street. I went to meet with her. And I went into her office, and I remember seeing the couch in the corner. I said, this is like a therapist's office. So I sat down, and I told her my story. I told her my situation. I told her the things that I struggled with as a teenager and as a young adult. And, you know, and if you know Mary, she kind of sat there, listened intently, didn't say much, took it all in. And, you know, she said to me that, you know, if you want to be a good social worker, you've got to, you know, you got to learn to work, right? So I said, okay. So she said, you know, I was in school at the time working on my master's, right, my master's degree, my MSW. So we talked about that, and she made a commitment to help me. But she also said some things to me that kind of, and if you know Mary, you know how this goes. So she said to me, and I will never ever forget this. She said to me, she said, you know, but you should get a therapist. If you want to be a good social worker, you need a therapist. And if you could see the look on my face, you know, if she said that to me, you know, so I remember saying something like, you know, I'm like, you know, yeah, I get that. I mean, I believe that's basically something like, I believe that's good for, you know,
Some people,
but it ain't for me. But then she hit me with it, and I'm sure she's had this conversation a zillion times with a zillion people before me and after. Well, how could you possibly do the work in any real way if you're asking people to do something that you wouldn't do yourself? And that was like the stone in my side, the rock in my shoe. I didn't have an answer for that. And that kind of just like hit me. I didn't really have an answer. I was kind of fumbling. So after that, she told me to continue to go to school, stay in touch. When you get your degree, call me back, and I will help you. And we stayed in touch. I kept her posted. She also told me that I'm going to recommend someone to you, because I guess she saw on my face that I wasn't too hot on what she was saying about a therapist. But she told me that I'm going to recommend my therapist to you, and I'd like you to give her a call. So I sat with that for a while. And again, you know, that gut thing, that intuition or whatever it is that moved me to kind of grapple with what she said. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it was true. Like I couldn't really get around the logic of that. You can't really ask people to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So thankfully I reached out, I was able to get a therapist and start therapy, stayed in touch, and true to her word and her commitment. And I knew there would be tremendous challenges to get me a job. She had me send her a resume. She got me, first job I applied for, I didn't get, but the second one I got. And I just have to say, you don't really understand what it is to have someone take the package sight unseen and believe in that. She did that. And I think, you know, had it not been for that, I wouldn't be here. You know, I wouldn't have my kids, and I wouldn't be Shirley DePena's husband, had it not been for that. So, you know, and I know I've taken time to say this, but I cannot tell you how critical it is. You know, that investment that Mary talked about, there was no one who would have invested in a position that, you know, like Mary had at that time. And for her to do that and not really know me, to take that risk, I will never forget that. Never, ever forget that.
Amazing, phenomenal. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you again, Mary. And so I want to introduce someone who's just joined us, right? The lovely Shirley DePena. So Shirley is Jonathan's wife, and she is also, she works for the City University of New York as the director of CUNY's Foster Youth College Success Initiative. She's also an adjunct professor at NYU, and she holds a PhD in social work from Yeshiva University. So welcome, Shirley. I'm so glad you were able to join us. Now,
Thank you, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
No, thank you. We know you had an emergency, so thank you for rejoining us. And I think this segues perfectly into our next question, right? So Mary spoke about, you know, what she's done in her role, and everyone has spoken about how they've been touched and really just phenomenally supported by Mary in their work and in their professional growth. And it really speaks to something that I think is key for all of us and key to what one of the things that we need to think about and really be transparent about. Everyone here is a person of color, right? And I want to really ask specifically, what's that been like? And maybe Shirley, you can start us off, but what has it been like for you, the times where you've worked at a private white institution, a PWI, as a person of color? What's that been? What was that like for you? And Shirley?
You know, for me, I think I went to predominantly white schools for undergrad and for grad school. And I then went to work at the Jewish Board, which was an institution where the leadership was predominantly white. I never truly felt like I belonged. I used to always talk about how I wasn't a real social worker. And for many, many years, I felt like that. And part of it, I think, was because I didn't have a desire to be a social worker my entire life. And, you know, like many people are, I didn't do an undergrad in social work or in anything like that. And I would get in the room and in spaces with these people who I didn't make the connection that they were also white. And they would speak in ways that I didn't speak. They would speak in ways that I didn't know how to speak. And because of that, it made me feel less than. And when I went to work at the Jewish Board, I worked in a program where it was, the program itself was, you know, it had some people of color because we were in Washington Heights. But the way that the clinics, I worked at I interned at an outpatient mental health clinic, the way that the clinics were really regarded was in this elitist way, which then for me, not being a real social worker, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to move. And so I just kind of, and I think this is just who I am, I folded into myself and I didn't look for support and for help, and I didn't ask. And it's something that I struggled with. And I struggled my entire second year internship. And then when I went to a predominantly, a program that was led by predominantly people of color, clients were predominantly people of color, the workers were predominantly people of color, it was just so different. And I started to see on some levels outside of myself, that it wasn't me, right? It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was this structural racism, but it was this structural piece in our society that the qualities that I did have were not regarded as qualities that were important. And that then, for me, made me feel like I wasn't important and I didn't have anything to bring to the table. And it's something that I struggled with, that sometimes I still do struggle with, feeling like I'm enough, feeling like I am enough. And so I'll pause there because I know I can talk a lot and I don't want to. But I'll pause for a minute there, let other people answer the question.
Thank you so much, Shirley. And you're talking a lot is really part of your charm. So thank you. But who else? So who else wants to talk a little bit about what that was like working at a PWI as a person of color?
Well, and then once they put us in director roles, we had to run like 2, 3, 4 programs. I mean, that was a hard transition. But also there's a kind of a gift in the work that Mary did around connecting us to each other. And she connected us to white folks too, who had a similar vision around how to do this work. Like I remember being connected to Lisa Blitz, and but we had to have so many meetings before the meeting. And then one of the things Mary taught me when I was struggling as a manager was like, this is not being a manager, it's about being a leader. And it's a skill. Like, why do you think you need to know something before you've learned it? Like, this is a skill. And I would even say that Mary saved a job for me before. I left the Jewish board after my first year placement, and I worked there for a year. And I went on to GMHC. And at one point, there were going to be layoffs. And I called her. This is the connection after. It's not about like only what you can be for me when you're in my vision or what I can get from you. That's not Mary, right? I mean, she works you to death in other ways, but she's working you to build a vision and an empire of sorts to change the world, okay? But I called her in the situation I was in. She made an appointment for me. That for the next day, half hour, she gave me everything I needed. Not only did I keep my job, I kept the salary. I was, I moved to a different department, kept the salary, eventually got promoted, got retroactive from the work I was doing before the promotion came through, like all of that kind of stuff. And so, but also like being a person of color in white institutions, like you have to sneak around. Like I had to like slip into Mary's office, like, and not let people see me in there. Like, when I think about that, it's messed up, that someone who can give you more strength when something is being taken away from you, that you have to sneak to protect them and to protect yourself. That's crazy, but that happened. I'd go to her side and act like I was going to the bathroom, and then I would look each way and slide my way into her office. And that red couch has heard and seen a lot of things, but having to be more than 10 times, learning over time that that's internalized racial oppression, but also knowing that that's true, that we have to be. And then also Mary helped me and 2 other people, Alicia and Maria, start Directors of Color. So that was before the Administrators of Color. Also, when I came back to the Jewish Board in '97, she had started a mentorship program. And it was '97. I got Marisol. Marisol still considers me her mentor. It's hilarious. And we just went out she took me out to brunch one day, like about a month or so ago. So it's like, and even then learning, like Mary has taught that you learn from people who you mentor. It's not just you have all this wisdom and you give it, like you learn too. And so I look back at even '97, I was all over the place, just became like an administrative supervisor. Marisol was the one. Can we meet? Can we meet? You know, I've had other people who I was mentoring, Caridad, she'd be like, you're better at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to have my supervision at 8 o'clock in the morning. And you know what? I gave it to her. That's the thing. So like, it's just figuring out and bringing other people in and having these side meetings and connecting people to other people. And like Shirley telling somebody, you want to go to Sheilah to be your field instructor. And they're like, coming, I didn't want to do domestic violence, but Shirley said, I want to work with you. And then them learning whatever they had to learn after that. And then they're spreading. So it's a lot of responsibility to be a person of color in a white institution, because our job is not just to get our positions, our job is to also bring people along. But Mary would also say when we were doing leadership stuff, but this is also a time for you to get something for you. It can't just be about you giving. It also is a time to get something for you. It's a big responsibility. So,
you know, I want to say this, and I'll keep it quick. So, you know, we all know those calls and from the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting with Mary, right? So I had some the experience working in the white institution, but, you know, Jewish board was a whole nother level being so big. And I remember I would sit in meetings sometimes with Mary and I would get, you know, the calls before and the calls after. But this is one thing I never forget. And I carry this with me and I will always carry this with me. I don't know what the meeting was, but, you know, to be at the table as a person of color is one of the challenges when you work in a, you know, all white institution. But I guess I didn't say anything, and I know I had some stuff to say. I didn't say anything, and I remember her calling me after. And sometimes you don't want the calls from Mary because Mary's going to be direct, and she's going to give it to you like you're supposed to get it. And she basically said to me, "Don't you ever sit at a table with these folks and don't speak up." And some in substance, and it was a little longer than that, a little harsher. But when you get in that room and you're at that table, find your voice. And I never ever forgot that, you know, and I think that's a powerful message for people of color because it's a challenge for us, you know, and we've been conditioned to not speak, to be small, to be silent. But she was clear to me, find your voice. Do not get in there and shrink because you have something to say.
Absolutely.
I know someone's going to say something. I'm going to say this just really quick about Shirley. And this is connected to Mary, is Mary encouraged us to bring our full selves. One of the things I love about Shirley the most is how she speaks. She hasn't changed. Like how she is so true to who she is. And then when she took on like the training of people to take the exam, like the licensing exam, I don't know why this makes me cry, but I sent people to her because I knew she was going to tell them that it wasn't about what they didn't know, that it was a structure that was to keep them out and they just had to learn the formula. But she was an example of that. And also her, like, you know, doing the field placements, like being in charge of those, like what that meant, like Mary, like gifted Shirley with that and Shirley gifted Mary back with what Mary wanted. But to be able to see what is a field placement and how do you build people, like, and how do you create a structure where people have people that they can depend on? But like Shirley has always been who she is. And she's a gift. You are a gift. Like I sound so white people will accept me. We are real, like it's a gift for someone to tell you, you can be yourself. And when you're not, I'm gonna give you words. And sometimes Mary curses, but she just doesn't do it in front of everybody. You know? If she thinks that's what she gotta use to get you there, it's not a lot of cursing. It's just like one word here or there. But Shirley, Jonathan's such a gift, Amira's such a gift, Mary's such a gift. But it's like we expected it of ourselves, and it just, you know, and we expected of other people. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sheilah. And Sheilah, a gift. Thank you. So I do want to ask this question, and I would love to hear from each of you. But you know, whoever this jumps at the most, what are you most proud of in your professional story?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. And Sheilah, you made me cry, so give me a minute. And I think Sheilah just spoke a little bit about it. One of the things somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody calls me Little Mary. I don't know who it is, but it's because one of the things that I learned from Mary and that I believe in and that I continue to do is that idea of finding people and of building people and of developing people. And so when I was the educational coordinator, when I was doing the internships for the Jewish board, I would find interns, or I would call somebody and be like, I got you an intern. You know, and that's something that I would do. And I do the 6 a.m. calls. I don't always do the 6 a.m. calls because I'm not always up at 6. That's a Mary specialty. But I do the phone calls that people know that when I'm calling to ask for something, I'm not quite asking. I'm like, you're gonna do this for me, but I'm asking it so that you think you have the option to say yes or no, but I'm calling, so you can't say no. And that's a Mary thing. Like when Mary calls you, you're gonna do it. You're not, you know, but she's gonna ask in a way that you think you have a choice, but you don't. But the idea of letting people know who they are. And so, you know, I've been teaching for a long time. I taught at Hunter, Touro, Columbia. Most recently, I'm at NYU. And I in all of the courses that I teach, I'm always talking to students about who they are, you know, and whether they're people of color, whether they're white students, but really helping them see that they need to know who they are and how people view them in the world, and how people view them in the world matters in their relationships with people and in the impact that they can make. So, you know, one of the things that I do know that is I am good at, and I thank Mary for this, is looking at people and helping people to understand that they are enough. And this happens a lot in my classes, especially at NYU, a predominantly white institution where, you know, what I've been told I do, and so I think I do it because this is what I get from students, is that I create a space for students to be themselves, to talk about the things that's very difficult to talk about in other classes, especially for students of color. And so I thank Mary for that, because I learned that from Mary. I learned, you know, finding people and connecting people to other people, but also letting people know that they are good enough. And so I am super proud of that professionally for myself. And also I would just say, you know, the PhD, I don't necessarily, you know, I don't think I'm better than anyone. I don't think I'm smarter than anyone because I have a PhD. I do, however, take pride in being Dr. DePena for all of the Latinos, you know, behind me that have never seen a doctor or a PhD behind a name like DePena, like Casiano. And I know that that means something to people. I've actually, and I've said this in other spaces, I've had the experience of people saying to me that they took my class because of my last name, because they knew that I had to be a Latina, and therefore they would have a Latino professor, and they'd never had a Latino professor. So that matters. And it's why, as much as I love my husband, professionally, I am still Shirley DePena, because I think that that matters to people who look like me.
That's why I'm Shirley's husband and she's not my wife. It's clear.
Well, while you're having this conversation, I want to have you tell people that those three little pumpkins that you have is all because of me.
No question, absolutely. No question whatsoever. I did say that earlier. I said I would not have I wouldn't be Shirley's husband or have my babies had it not been for Mary.
And let me add, hold on, let me add. So what Mary, you said to Jonathan about therapy, he said to me about therapy, and I probably had the same face.
Yeah, it was the
he
same look.
had.
Yeah.
But I did it. And so I will say, if again, this all ties back to you, right? If I honestly feel like therapy, I wouldn't have gotten married if it wasn't for the therapy that Jonathan and I engaged in individually and as a couple. So, Mary runs through this household very, very much. So yes, Mary, because of you, I am married, I have a husband, and I have 3 beautiful pumpkins.
And I just want to say one thing to tie into what Shirley said so beautifully. If there's one thing that I'm proud of, if there's one superpower or thing that I have and I will take with me to my grave, it is knowing my worth. That worth, that candle has to be an eternal candle with an ever flickering flame that can, the winds of institutional racism can make it flicker a little bit and blow it a little bit. Because if you're a person of color, you're going to deal with that. There are going to be times when you have self-doubt. But unequivocally know your worth, know your value. That is, if I had to sum it up in terms of a lesson that I got from Mary, know your worth. Because at the end of the day, if you tie it to what other people say and what other people do, and if you're a person of color, you are going to struggle mightily. So knowing your worth and understanding that no matter what happens, and even when you reach beyond your grasp sometimes, it's fine. White folks do it all the time, even when they don't have a clue. It's okay. But know your worth. So thank you for that.
Terrific. Yes. Thank you so much for all of this. So, Mary, you've done so much. My goodness.
I've grown so much. I've learned so much. I feel so full from the wonderful things. I saw they had something they wanted to say, and I'd be real interested in hearing that, because we do want to hear the voices.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'll jump in. In terms of my greatest professional kind of the thing that I'm most proud of is the fact that I could be more of who I am anywhere that I go. And yes, like Jonathan and Shirley were saying, right, institutional racism, white supremacy, all of that makes that flame flicker. But also being Dr. Casiano means a lot in the same way, because I'm standing on the shoulders of Mary, right? And all of y'all who have contributed, right, to that journey. And it's really about building that. I heard some of you in this conversation talking about your struggle, right, in a predominantly white institution. For me, I felt that I was lucky, especially in my proximity of the Jewish poor, because of what was already built, what y'all were already building for me, right? Someone who was coming up. I was able to become a supervisor at a clinic that was predominantly, Latinx people, serving that community that mirrored that community. And I was able to grow, and the leadership, we were decolonizing on what that meant, right? To be a leader and to meet people at their need and to meet each other at our humanity, to create space for healing. Alicia and Shirley had a lot to do with that, but Alicia and Shirley, right, it all trickles out. It was connected to a community that was really fostered and fought for, right, for Mary. So I had some easier ground. Now, when I became a clinic director at another institution, I truly felt the backlash, right, of what it means to feel like enough, and the hustle and bustle of growing. And another thing that I'm so grateful that Mary also instilled was to just not focus on being a professional clinician, to also develop skills in other areas of management, of leadership, of budgets, right? And that made me pursue also other degrees that grounded me with different skills. But all the degrees that I have are not the thing that makes me worthwhile. It's my ancestors and the folks that I stand on, the Afro-Tainos of Puerto Rico, right? Those are the people that I stand, ancestors that give me healing, that give me language, that let me be who I am, right? As a non-binary person, as a queer person, all of those things, right? And that is transformational for me, it's giving me a language. And Mary had a big influence in my life, you know, and now I'm connected, you know, to all of y'all, and also doing the same in community with other people, because we all get co-opted. So we always have to remain vigilant, you know, so it's a constant vigilance myself, right? But I just really wanted to share that, and just my gratitude. You know, you all played a role with encouraging that leadership.
Thank you so much, Dr. Castellano.
Yeah, I'll just,
Absolutely.
so I'd like to say that the thing that I feel most proud about is the work that I see all of you doing, the folks that you're bringing along in the process, because for me, the growth is about who else is in your network, building the biggest network that you possibly can across racial network of people, because in essence, none of us can do this work alone. And the idea that we always need people to be able to reach out to in the midst of the work. And I never let go in terms of, even when people move away, they do other things, I keep the relationship going. That's the work that I do, and it brings me such pride to be able to make that 6 a.m. call, knowing that people are gonna be responsive, send out that email that people are gonna respond to. And that only happens because of nurturing the relationships. And so in essence, it's my greatest gift, and it's also my greatest sense of pride to be able to see how big the network has gotten because of what you folks are doing. And Amira, I want to make sure that you are clear about the fact that what you're doing, your work, should be highlighted here. And I want to make sure that we don't end without having you make comments of that nature, whether you had planned to or not. I'm wanting to make sure that you do.
Thank you, Mary. So my company, MA Therapy LLC, which I named in a training with Mary as an assignment, right? So my company, MA Therapy, I have multiple divisions, Amira for her, Amira for him. These two divisions focus on providing Black and Brown mental health care providers to Black and Brown community. I also have the Black Speakers Institute, which provides workshops, trainings around mental health with a focus on the Black and Brown community. And I also have Phenomenal Private Practice with Amira, where I provide coaching, group and individual coaching to people